The following episode was originally recorded for a private podcast as part of the Equipped for Life course. It has been edited for public release, but may reference training material from the Equipped for Life course.
So Jacob, you know how sometimes people that you know personally bear an uncanny resemblance to like a celebrity or a famous person?
Yeah.
Where are you going with this?
Do you know who Josh strongly resembled growing up?
No.
See if you can figure it out.
Snape?
Snape?
What? What?
All right.
Alan
That's
Rickman?
what you come up with?
All right, you got to explain that before I give you the answer.
He's got dark hair. I feel like...
Yeah, Snape
That's
has
it?
like sallow skin and long flowing
I'm not
black
talking about what
hair.
the book said. I'm talking about the
That's
way
what
the
I'm talking
movie,
about.
Alan Rickman.
Yeah, you think I look
Well,
like
if
Alan
he had
Rickman?
if he had long hair and...
Oh my
He
gosh.
didn't have
You
hair
are
that
so
long.
bad at this game.
Okay. Well,
Okay, so the answer is Ralph Macchio from The Karate Kid.
what was his name? Daniel
Spitting
something?
image. Yeah, Daniel.
Danielson.
Spitting image.
Yeah. Okay, I can see that.
Before I had facial hair.
Otherwise
younger.
known as the bad guy in the Karate Kid movie.
Well, hold on a second. The bad guy in the Karate Kid movie?
Yeah, he's the one that picked a fight with Johnny.
Okay, so I will grant you that Daniel is not the perfect picture of virtue, but to call him the villain is way overstating it.
So I think this is an important distinction in that movie where we're led to believe that there's this one white knight in shining armor being Daniel, and then there's the evil, nasty kid, Johnny. And my view is not that. My view is that they were both pretty rotten kids.
Neither one of them are
However-
great kids, but to say villain...
However, I think Danny was a what's the right word? A worse kid. He was
He
like,
was worse than Johnny.
yeah. I mean, come on.
Like I've heard a fan theory that basically kind of says that Johnny, like, he's the good guy in the end because he's really nice about it after the
Oh,
other
sure.
one.
Yeah. At the end, Johnny insists on giving him the trophy and is very gracious, and that's awesome.
That's great. I've never heard anyone say that Johnny's the hero of the story. Like,
I
is
wouldn't
that
go
what-
so far to say that he's the hero. I think it's like both of them were pretty deplorable. Johnny's a little better than Danny, though.
So
How is it
it's
better?
not that Johnny's the hero; it's that Daniel's the villain.
It's that Danny's, villain. I'd have to think about what you mean by villain. We have to get into a long discussion, but I'm just going to shorten
I don't
it
think
by
we have to
saying...
get into a long discussion.
I'm just going to
Is Darth
shorten it
Vader
by
the
saying
villain? Well, I mean, like it depends on the
Darth
definition
Vader's
of villain.
clearly the villain here.
Are you sure Yoda isn't the villain, Jacob?
We can talk about that.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, here's what I'm going to do. There is no way I'm keeping all of this in the podcast because this has gone past the 10-minute mark on a debate about the Karate Kid. So, I'm going to keep like the beginning and the end of this. And if you actually are interested in hearing Tim and Jacob spar about the Karate Kid for about 10 minutes, I'm going to have a deleted scene on the page where you can download that, and it's just going to be that. It'll be fun. But if you're like, I just want you to get to the pro-life stuff, we're not keeping all of that in this main podcast file. So, topic. We want to talk about burden of proof.
You mean what Jacob failed to fulfill in that last debate?
Okay, so we want to talk about burden of proof. I'm just going to let that go.
I don't know if I can let that go.
I am, as the moderator, trying to force you to not get
Very
into it.
convenient parting shot.
That was a very convenient party shot. Very not cool.
Withdrawn.
Not accepted.
In one of the biology videos, I shared some of our views that I think it's definitely pushing against the grain of what most like Christian apologists teach, including many apologists that we have a great deal of respect for. We just think differently. But the argument that I made on the biology video, this is basically Tim's argument, but I presented for him, was basically that at a logical level, it seems reasonable to expect people to defend the claims that they make. But at a pragmatic level, it is rarely the most persuasive option. And that if you've got better arguments than they do, then it'll probably be more persuasive to bear some of their burden and respond with your own arguments as opposed to always forcing them to defend every claim that they make. That flies in the face of I think, what most Christian apologists teach, Christian apologists that we have a lot of respect for. And so I want us to talk more about that. Like, I would imagine someone hearing that and saying, well, gee, it seems like you're just giving the people you talk to way too easy of an out. They can say whatever they want, and you're going to be Mr. Nice Guy and not make them defend it. You're just going to respond with your arguments, and like that doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like it just seems like super counterintuitive to what is going to make the most sense in a dialogue.
Yeah, I hear that, and I think the first thing that I want to say is what we're recommending is not never shift the burden of proof, but if you can do something else instead, do that. Like, I see shifting the burden of proof as like a last resort.
Right.
In the example in the biology video, like you're talking to someone who's just like flat out denying biological humanity of the unborn. And in a case like that, like they won't respond to biological evidence. It's just the kind of objections, the kind of stubborn anti-science response that just it demands a like you're making a claim that you need to defend kind of response.
Right.
There's a lot of other kinds of claims where we can do something else instead. So if someone says, I think that having sentience is what makes you a person, you can respond by saying, well, why do you think that? And that's a fine question. But if you do it in a like, so, well, you've said that sentience makes you a person. Well, now it's your turn to defend that. Right. You made the claim, you bear the burden. It's kind of like the common phrasing.
Right.
He who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. And instead of doing that, we're more inclined to show why sentience isn't a good criteria for personhood because of the bad consequences that it has. If sentience is the thing that makes us persons, then squirrels are persons, right? Because squirrels are sentient. And the kind of reaction that a person has to that, just at a on the ground, really practical level, is, oh, like that seems like that's a problem with my view. I think burden of proof is it's this weird thing because I don't think people generally think that they need to defend their claims in their minds. Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
So if someone says something like it just seems like sentience, like that's like I'm kind of like looking at the world and I'm having this internal reflective experience about like what I think it is that I'm human, and like they come up with sentience.
They're speaking this self-evident thing to them.
Kind of like it feels self-evident to them, and so if you say prove it, defend your claim, then like they might not have a good answer for you, so you might win some rhetorical points there. But I don't think they're going to walk away and change their mind, generally speaking. At least that hasn't been my experience in interacting with people, and my just kind of like way of thinking about how people process ideas. I think they're more likely to say, I think my view is really reasonable, and just kind of like say that to themselves and kind of walk away and not really have to wrestle with the fact that they didn't have a good defense of that claim because it just makes internal sense to them. And so the alternative approach of saying, like, showing here, oh, here's why this actually shouldn't make internal sense to you, because if this is true, then this is also true, is a lot more likely to stick in their mind and change their mind later, or even in the conversation, which we've actually seen a lot. So it's not to say like never make them defend their claim, but if you can do something else, if you can disprove their argument in a different way, I think it's going to be more persuasive.
Tim, I've heard you do something that I found really helpful, and I've started doing as well. They'll make a claim, and you can kind of get a sense if they're repeating something that they've heard and they just respect the person they've heard it from, so they've adopted this view. Mm-hmm. But they can't explain it themselves. They're not really sure, and they don't know us. So to then just accept us by saying, no, that's not true, or explain it more, and they can't do it, they think, well, just because I can't explain it doesn't mean it's not true. And I've heard you, Tim, ask or explain to the person if they make a claim and they can't explain it very well. You've helped them explain it better. You've actually strengthened their pro-choice view quite a bit, and they go, "Oh, okay." Their argument, their argument quite a bit, and they're going, "Yeah, that's what I believe. Thank you. That's it."
Yeah.
And then there's this interesting thing happens where they know that you're really listening and you understand them, and now because they felt understood, there's a lot more acceptance for what you have to say about the matter. It's like, oh, I think this guy actually knows what he's talking about. He's just not rambling his talking points. He understands at least where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and not trying to score cheap rhetorical points. But of course, at this point now, if any of our listeners are thinking, man, you're letting them off so easy, and now it's even worse. Not only are you not making them bear their burden of proof and defend their claims, you're helping them make their argument even stronger. And stay with me if that's you. What we're trying to do in our conversations, we're trying to create an environment that's well suited to the person feeling safe to change their mind. We're not trying to score rhetorical points. I don't think that people, generally speaking, change their mind because someone pulled a really effective rhetorical trick on them. If that happens, they might walk away frustrated or wonder, oh man, what could I have said differently or something. But it's not getting inside their head. Like professional sports are like, I'm in their head now, like that kind of thing. Like I'm trying to get in their head, but in a more friendly way. I'm trying to like help them rethink their view in a way that actually affects how they're going to think in the future. And so these kinds of steps, as much as it's letting them off the hook in some sense, I think it's more likely to actually cause them to change their mind. It's a terrible debate move. If you're at a podium, don't do this. Debating on stage or something. But if you're one-on-one with someone and trying to get them to change their mind, I think both of these kinds of steps are very helpful.
Okay. Devil's advocate.
Okay.
It seems like your approach to dialogue is very oriented toward letting the other person control the conversation, control the flow of the conversation, and maybe even jerk you around or walk all over you, as opposed to a lot of other apologists who teach you how to use certain kinds of dialogue techniques to sort of keep control of the conversation, for like not in a mean way, for like what's better for the person. It would be better for them to become pro-life, and so keep some sense of control, make sure the conversation stays on the right topic, and you kind of stay in the driver's seat. Seems to be like a helpful thing to teach the person who is right after all.
Sure.
So that would be kind of the pushback that I would imagine some people listening might have.
Well, I don't feel like I've lost control of the conversation when I do this. I feel like I'm just like I'm being more deft about it or something. Like I'm being more diplomatic with it. It's the Grand Moff Tarkin line that I love so much. When Princess Leia talking to Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars. She says, the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. Yeah. And it's that kind of thing. If you're trying to hold on to them tightly and really keep control of the conversation and direct it really firmly, it's going to put their shields up, and they're not going to be in as receptive a kind of frame of mind. And then it could be that one of the maybe changes that they're wanting to, like they want to change the topic or something. It could be that matters a lot to them. And so certainly, like, I'm not saying, oh, just like let them jerk you around and take you wherever they want in the conversation. Sometimes they're going to say a distracting thing, and I'm going to say, oh, well, I don't think so, and keep directing the conversation. But I'm way more diplomatic about the way that I do it.
You're like the genius chess player who like is letting certain things happen, and everyone watching is like, oh no, he's like, he let out his queen too early, and there's all these things losing all these pieces, but it turns out the entire time, like, he actually kind of had control of the situation, and he knows what he's doing and can handle it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, if we could change the analogy so it's not that I'm a genius chess player, that'd be better. But
I'm trying to think of a movie example of like this
I'm in control, but I'm not being heavy-handed about it.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why the approach of being really quick to shift the burden of proof is a very attractive one. It's one that I used to do and really like, is that like it's easier. It's easier to just say, hey, you made this claim, your turn, you defend it. And then if they make some statement defending it, push them and say, that's not enough. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to memorize arguments.
Okay. Devil's advocate follow-up then.
Yeah.
If it's easy, like one of the hardest things that we ask pro-life people or Christians or whoever to do is to actually go and have conversations with people who think differently than them. Some people, for them to actually go and do the hard thing of finding someone who thinks differently and talk to them about an emotionally charged issue where they might even get yelled at by someone, like, let them do the easy way of doing it. Like, you're telling them to do the way harder way of doing it, of avoiding like the easy like the things you can do that make the conversation easier, like little rhetorical flourishes and making them defend all their views. Like if that's easier, like isn't this like the training wheels like we talked about in the last episode? Like give them the training wheels for a while and then let them take them off.
It's easier to walk up to a person and slap them in the face with a fish than it is to make a careful argument to them. Anyone can slap someone in the face with a fish, but it's not persuasive.
Okay, and now all the apologists, their heads exploded because you just compared their training material to slapping people with fish.
You jumped in too quickly. Let me do a here's what I'm saying, here's what I'm not saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying that shifting the burden of proof or like being really quick to shift the burden of proof is as bad or unpersuasive as slapping people in the face with fishes. I'm saying that the fact that it's easier doesn't mean we should train people to do it if it's not effective. And I don't think it's effective. I'm concerned about the problem of how difficult it is to go out and talk to people who are very different than you and try to change their minds. It's hard because there's all kinds of what if they say this? What if they say this? Who knows what they might say? And so it's more comforting to go into it with a perspective of, well, I've always got something in my back pocket. I can just make them like do more burden of proof or something like that. That's like emotionally comforting, and I'm sorry to take away your security blanket, but that's not effective. It's not persuasive. If you're concerned about like what do you do if they say something you don't know how to respond to or an argument you haven't heard of before, just admit that you don't know, and that's okay. And it's better than jump into, well, just keep defending it. The kind of people who are really, really like novices, like really inexperienced, who are going to be the most quote unquote benefited from the just shift the burden of proof all the time tactic, are also going to be the people who are going to struggle the most with doing it too much. Someone gives a response, they respond, and they're like, they don't know what else to say. And so they go back to their happy place, which is, doesn't seem like enough. And then the conversation just shuts down. It can't progress. It's the wrong kinds of habits. I feel like the reason the training wheels thing is no good is because, as an analogy here, is because training wheels like help you get into a good habit of how to ride your bike. Mm-hmm. This is more like saying, I'll learn better piano posture down the road after I've been playing for 10 years. I'm going to start my first 10 years with horrible posture, and then I'll fix it later. No, the habits that you form early on in your piano playing days are going to stick with you. Yeah. And I think the kind of mindset that's very inclined to shift the burden of proof is just a bad mental habit.
If somebody says, Tim, I don't think I can go out there because for whatever reason and do it the way you're saying, can I start off by doing this? Can you need to prove it to me? You have the burden of proof because you've made the statement. If somebody says that to you, would you rather them not go out and get started off that way? Because that's what I think I heard you say. And if that's the case, I respectfully disagree with you.
Yeah, I don't think that's my view exactly.
Okay.
Like the phrasing, like, would you let someone, I can't remember exactly what your phrasing
I shouldn't say it, let someone. Let me say prefer. Let's say you're the king over the universe and you get to decide you're worthy to go out and do pro-life work. Let's go absolute here.
Sure.
You're the king of the pro-life movement. You've been nominated. Nobody can do anything without asking you. And I come to you and I say, Mr. King Tim, can I go out and I really have a good heart. I really want to do this, but I really need to start off with, you've made the claim, so I want you to share and explain to me and justify it, because I'm just not confident enough yet to do it the way you're talking about.
You see what's happening here. He wants you to bear the burden of proof.
Josh, I would really appreciate it if you didn't show all my cards.
I can bear the burden of proof here, so that's fine. I think it's a great question, Jacob. So I think what I would say is something like this. Generally speaking, not absolutely, but generally speaking, I'm inclined to say it's better to make a mistake by doing than to make the mistake of not trying.
I agree.
So I would rather someone go out and try and fail hard and learn from it and then get better. My first conversations about abortion were not anything to be proud of. Yeah. We'll get into that story someday maybe, but like it was very, very bad. But like you got to start somewhere, and I learned from it. And a lot of the things that I've learned to do well, I know to do well because I've done the opposite thing and learned from it. Yeah. And so if someone's going out and they're not confident and they're not sure how to do it, like I'm going to have a lot of leeway, especially if they're gracious. The kind of person that I'm inclined to say maybe you shouldn't go is the person who can't keep their anger in check or can't keep the kind of the snarky attitude they have towards people in check.
That's a great point.
But if they're like weak at making arguments, I'm inclined to say give it a shot. Give it a shot, and then like when you fail, because you're going to get questions you don't know how to answer, you're going to learn from that experience and be really humble about it, and just say that you don't know. And if they're asking me something like what you did, it's like, well, can I please just shift the burden of proof on them? I'm gonna be like, here's what I'm saying. I'm not going to recommend that you do that. I don't think that's better for you. But I'm not saying like you can't. Like, I'm not your mom. Like, if you want to shift the burden of proof really quickly because you don't know what else to say, then that's your call to make. As a person giving you advice, I think you would be better off just saying, I don't know. At least in a lot of circumstances. I'm not saying that, of course, again, I'm not saying you should never shift the burden of proof. I'm saying, but if someone says, yeah, I think sentience makes you a person. I think maybe ask one time, help me understand why you think that. I don't know why someone would think that, and do it in a nice way. And then when they give their response, don't just keep on asking them over and over. Well, I still don't get it. Don't do that. And that's what I think a lot of people who are kind of trained in this way of thinking, they're inclined to do, is to keep on pushing. And that's one of the things that I'm worried about.
Yeah, well said. When you said, I wish I could remember exactly how you said it, but you just said something to the effect of, I'd rather you go out there and fail hard and learn from it and move on. You're talking about me. I mean, not specifically that
I wasn't trying to.
that's how I learned.
We have this in common.
I went out, and everything that we've talked about today and before, the reason why I don't do it anymore is because I've found out it fails. Some things worse than others, and making other people prove the burden, have the proof of, how do we say that? Let me say that again. Making other people how do we say that?
Defend their claims.
Defend their claims. Making other people defend their claims. I haven't found it to be effective, so I abandoned it.
Yeah.
I would rather help them make their claim stronger and then gently, nicely tear it down with them.
Now, let's clarify again. I'm going to have to clarify this 70 times because I know this is going to be so easy to misunderstand what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that people never have to defend their claims. I'm saying if there is an alternative way to go, that's the better way to go. And if you're going to shift the burden of proof, even in a place where it's like reasonable to shift the burden of proof, it's somewhat reasonable to say, I don't understand why you would say sentience is the thing that makes you a person, which is my go-to example today for some reason. Like that's not totally wrong. And if the person that I'm talking to who's timid says, I think that's what I want to do, I'm say, okay, start there, but you're going to hear a good response. I think another reason why this feels a lot more empowering and effective to like the Christians or the pro-lifers is because it's harder for us to get into the shoes of the other person. Mm-hmm. It's like I remember when I was a teenager, when we did the Teens for Life thing together, thinking about arguments like consciousness and sentience. I was like, this is a stupid argument. It's so stupid. This arrogant son of a gun. Like to the point where like I couldn't play the pro-choice side well on that. Yeah. I just thought it was such a stupid, absurd position. Yeah. And so when you're thinking about it in your own head, that's just going to be a devastating response. You're going to ask, why do you think sentience is the thing that makes you a person? And they're going to be like, whoa, I've never thought about that before. And that's not the real world, folks. That's not it. They've got an answer to the question. And it's not one that you maybe can imagine, but they have an answer that makes sense to them. And so to just keep pushing them on it isn't going to be good. There's another reason I'm inclined to discourage people from being really quick to jump to shifting the burden of proof, which is that I think that like burden of proof is just kind of a weird subject in general, and it puts people in a weird mindset, kind of like in like another way. So like the phrase he who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. Like if you focus really hard on that phrase and you're thinking, how do I position myself best in the conversation? That can lead to people just not making claims, which is so frustrating to watch. Like I've seen this happen far too many times where it's like a pro-life person and a pro-choice person, and they're talking and they're kind of arguing, but they're arguing in such a careful way that neither of them actually has made a claim. And if anyone and it says, hey, you need to defend that, the other person will say, no, I don't. I didn't make a claim. It's like, come on, guys.
I implied a claim.
And like, it's hard because there is some truth to the idea that if you make a claim, you should bear the burden. So if I say unicorns exist, like, it seems like I should be the one that has to defend that claim. You shouldn't be the one that has to refute it for me. But if you go into the conversation with the mindset of this is so important and it's going to affect the way I'm positioning myself, then like maybe you're not going to say I think abortion's wrong. You're going to avoid it. Someone says, what do you think about abortion? Be like, I don't know. I've got complicated views about abortion. You're just going to dodge the question. And I don't think we should do that. I think that's evasive. I think people can smell it. They understand what's going on there, and it's obnoxious. And it's just like it's a weird way to think about burden of proof. I feel like everyone's going to be better off if we think about it more like there's an implicit kind of burden of proof that both sides have. The pro-life person thinks that abortion is wrong. The pro-choice person thinks that abortion is not wrong. And now they're talking. And at some level, they should both have to defend that view. And to say, well, I don't have to make arguments because I haven't said the words in the conversation is, I think, really unhelpful.
Tim, it is very frustrating. I've had students that I'm trying to talk with, and they just won't commit to anything.
Yeah.
And there's this, well, what do you believe about this? Well, I don't know, but I feel this way or something. And it's so hard to have a productive conversation if you won't just share what your beliefs are, why you believe it. And I think it's very damaging for the pro-life person to be so closed.
Yeah.
Because the pro-choice person then feels like there's this regular, like he's about to strike, or he doesn't know what he believes. He's out here just like, what is he doing?
It affects the atmosphere of the conversation too, though. Like so much of what I think makes my conversations go well comes down to just one word: authenticity.
Yeah.
Like two people who are playing this like weird, it's like they're both in a duel where they can't make the first move, and it's just like they're just like dancing around in circles basically around this thing. Like there is nothing authentic about this conversation. You guys are both playing this game, and when we play games, either when we're the ones playing it or they're playing it or we're both playing it, this conversation is not going to go that well. Because they're not in a mindset where they're actually honestly examining their own views. They're too busy thinking about the game. Like they're having to concentrate on not breaking the rule of the game, which is don't make a claim or else you're like now they've got the high ground, and now you're gonna lose because you made the first claim.
It's so much more effective to just be transparent. Just be transparent about your view. Nobody changes their mind from arguing back and forth about who has the burden of proof, which is what a lot of arguments devolve into is, hey, well, no, you have the burden of proof. No, you've got the burden of proof. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like there's got to be a better way you can spend your time than that. and the better way is just be transparent.
Yeah.
And that leaves a certain kind of vulnerability. Again, like at a debate level, this might get you in trouble because you kind of leave yourself open to the person saying, well, you made a claim. I gotcha. And I'd say just let it happen. And you've got a better chance of having the conversation become more authentic and more productive if you kind of like lower that shield first and like kind of lead by example in that way.
Totally agree.
I was talking with my friend Evan Freeman last night. We had this really interesting conversation.
Evan Freeman.
Evan's a very interesting person.
He is a very interesting person. Should we tell people about my first experience with Evan Freeman?
Sure.
Because you and Evan... Okay, so who is Evan to you?
So Evan was my roommate in college for a while and one of my very, very dear friends.
Evan loves to debate.
Yes, he does.
Debate
He's very good at it.
It's a game. Like it is his form of entertainment. It's way more fun to him than I think like playing video games or anything else.
And not with like atheists and like pro-choice people.
No.
Like with his friends.
His friends debating anything. We end up in this 2-hour debate over what?
It started off with whether or not anyone juggled geese.
Yes. Is it possible to juggle geese? And I made the audacious claim that no, you couldn't actually juggle geese because of the way geese act when they're thrown around. And it turned into, like, what is juggling? What exactly is the best definition of juggling?
Yeah, and to be fair, like Evan was primarily just yanking our chains and having a very good time. But Evan's very, very smart and very insightful, and he had a really good thought last night. Because I've been trying to put my finger on, like I feel like there's something going wrong with the burden of proof thing, which is that on one hand, it seems like it's way overrated and people put too much emphasis on it. And on the other hand, I don't want to throw it out completely. So like there's this part of me, because I just hate you have the burden of proof, you have the burden of proof. I hate those conversations so much that I want to just throw it all out the window. It's just like, nope, no more burden of proof. It's a total phantom. I can't throw it out completely because of like the unicorn example. Like I guess sometimes it does seem like someone has some kind of a burden there.
Right.
Evan had a really good suggestion on how to like go about that in a conversation in a way that still holds on to like there is a proper place for it, but also without having it have this negative rhetorical effect, which is that he wanted to distinguish between like the epistemic side of burden of proof and like the psychological, like kind of ethics side of burden of proof. So the epistemological side is just like whether or not someone's view is justified, whether they have enough justification to believe their view. So I've said unicorns exist, and Jacob says, nah. And I say, sure they do. Now, Jacob could say, you have the burden of proof, and like, like you have this imperative, you have this requirement to give more evidence. And don't do that. Instead, just focus on the epistemological side. Just say, I don't think there's enough evidence there. It doesn't seem to me like there's enough evidence for me to believe that that's the case. And I don't understand why you think there's enough evidence for you to believe that that's the case. Like, help me out here. And what you're doing there then is you're pointing out that that there isn't enough justification to believe the claim, at least enough justification that's on the table, without being like, you have to do this. And without putting it on the other person in like a way that they're going to feel like is aggressive. And I love that because that like allows me to hang on to like the part of it that's useful without also putting too much emphasis on it. So I actually, like, we just talked about that last night. That's going to be one of the things that I try out next time we go to campus, is to try to talk about burden of proof in that kind of way. Just focusing on, it doesn't seem like there's enough justification there, as opposed to, hey, you haven't met your burden of proof. You've got to do this.
Well, isn't it like really similar to the gravity example that we used on the course, where it's like if someone's like denying gravity, it's like, well, see, like, here's the problem for me. Like, I just like, you have a persuasiveness problem. It's going to be really hard for you to convince me of that unless you bring like a certain kind of a very specific kind of evidence of like experts coming like and explaining like why I shouldn't believe in gravity and all this. Like, is that kind of similar or is it different?
I think it's similar. I think I'd probably phrase it differently, or at least like what I'm inclined to test next. I'd be inclined to phrase differently. This is an untested idea, cooked up in the laboratory, and like we haven't tried it yet. I think I would say something more like, I don't understand the justification to believe that gravity doesn't exist. I'm confused here. What I'm seeing on the table here in terms of the evidence, it seems really heavily weighted on this side. So I don't understand why you believe this. It doesn't seem like there's enough justification to believe the thing that you believe.
Okay, so something I haven't said on the end of every episode, but it's something that's pretty much always true, is if you have follow-up questions, I want you to post them in the comments. I want us to be able to respond to feedback and pushback. Do you disagree with Tim? There's probably follow-up questions that could be asked that Jacob and I didn't ask today, and so I'm interested. What is your take on Tim's view about shifting the burden of proof? If you disagree, or even if you agree, but you want to pose some other devil's advocate questions, post them so we can respond in a future episode. I've already got some follow-up questions on something else we said in the course that we're going to be covering in one of the next episodes, and I want us to be able to do that more in the future. If you've got thoughts, if you've got questions, post them in the comments so we can talk about them in the future.